works?
Yeah.
Got lucky.
Yes.
My name's Charlotte, and what I was wondering is, after the war, if your family stayed together for the entire time, or if you continued to separate a little bit.
Yeah, we continued to separate. Yeah. With the 4 children that were left, but the first 3 ones, we didn't know what happened to them or so. We sort of like. Did I tell you how we came to Germany?
No.
I don't think so.
No, I think I left off where we were in a kibbutz in Szczecin, right, in Poland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Well, the 4 children, we were separate, and my parents were not with us. They were in another place. So the 4 of us, they smuggled over through the Russian and German borders at that time through the Russian and Polish borders. They smuggled us into Szczecin, and then we went to Berlin. At that time, our parents came already, and we were like a couple of months best of. I don't know how long it was.
Can you spell the name of the place you were in Poland?
Sure. Give me a piece of paper. If I remember correctly.
And if you know what year that was? It must have been
near. I knew, but I forgot. I think I have to ask my husband. We were not long ago. We went back there.
Yeah.
What was it near? Oh, it doesn't come in, but I know it. Okay. I think that's how you spell it.
We can look it up and double check it. It's probably.
Oh God, it's not coming in.
That's alright then.
As best as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see if I make it in Polish. Can't remember.
It's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
One more thing, can you
Oh,
speak
wait a minute.
little-
SZETIN.
Great.
Sorry, one more thing, can you speak up, because the noise in the background, I just want to make sure we have everything you say.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, once the Stalin at that time said that all the people that were born in Poland can go back, and we were sort of like liberated from Russia to go back to Poland, there was nobody left in Poland. All our families from my father's side and from my mother's side were all annihilated by Hitler, so we couldn't stay in Poland. At that time, a lot of people came already from Israel, and they started to organize so that the people would have some place to go. They put the children into a kibbutz, and this is where I and my sister, who was still very little at the time, and my 2 older brothers, we went into this kibbutz in Szczecin. And our parents had to stay in another place. And from Szczecin, because the Israeli shlichim, I think they were called, but they were involved already, so they organized so that the children should be smuggled over from Poland into Germany, where there was already, from the concentration camp people, they were liberated in 1945, and there were already groups, and they were DP camps where the people lived, so they started to bring us over into Germany. And that's where we were.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so was it that Israelis had come to Poland to help set up this?
To help the people that came back from Russia,
Okay.
and also the people that survived the concentration camps. And that they were Israelis. And I think there were also other nations. They started to bring in the UNRWA, which was a United Nations help organization. Mm-hmm. And then a little while later, ORT came in, so they started to help the people that survived. In Berlin, where we lived, we were already with our parents together. We had a small room in an apartment building where we lived. We were there together, and then in this, it was called Tempelhof, and we stayed there, and they started to organize schools. I went to a Hebrew school with my sister and my one brother. My older brother Gessel was already, I guess, too old at the time to go to the school that they organized. So he and my father went on the black market, and they started to buy stuff off. At that time, it was after the war, and the Germans were selling a lot of their belongings and jewelry for food. It was a very hard, bad time, and for cigarettes and all that. So they started to bring in food to us, and we stayed there. We stayed in Berlin, I think, from 45 or 46 till 48, when the blockade came, where the Russians didn't let any food come into Berlin. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. Mm-hmm. So the Americans took the people from the survivors, and they lifted them over by air we came into Bavaria, and the place that we went to from there was called Deggendorf. In Deggendorf, my older brother and my father, they couldn't make a living, so my older brother went back to Berlin. This is when we separated again. Gessel, well, he must have been maybe 19, 18 at the time or so.
Can you spell Deggendorf?
Sure.
Because I don't think that's
I think it's a double G.
great.
If not, make one.
Okay.
Can you read my writing?
Yeah.
It might be a one G, but I think it's two G's.
Gensel was 18, 19 at the time, is that?
I think so. Let's see, this was already 48. Yeah, he was about 19. So he went back to Berlin where we lived before, but again, there was nothing there. And he was wandering the streets, he told us, looking where to stay. At that time, he met his future wife. She already had an apartment, and she saw that he had no place to go, even to sleep over the night. And they met, and she says, come to my apartment. You can stay there for a while until you find your way. And so he stayed. Let's see, how many years later? I think 1952, they got married. Yeah. We stayed in Deggendorf until I went to a German school there, tried to settle in, but then I guess it must have been the Americans doing it, because from there we had to move again, and we went into another camp which was called Lechfeld. Okay.
great.
Okay. Lechfeld will stay until my 16th birthday. So I was 16 in Lechfeld. But then again, we had to move again because the camps kept on liquidating. There were less and less people. Some people started to immigrate already to all parts of the world, Australia, Argentina, Canada, and the United States, of course, too. But it was very hard to get into the United States. You needed somebody to sponsor you. You needed an affidavit. Without it, and you had to be well. With that, you couldn't come to the States. They wouldn't let everybody in. So they started to liquidate one camp after the other. And from Lechfeld in 1950 or 51, we went again by train to another camp which was called Fehrenwald. Let me spell that for you. Okay. that's where I met my husband.
So how did you meet him?
I met him sort of like a friend of ours introduced us, but before that in Lechwart actually in Fairveld I started, no, before that we were still I have to take this call. I decided I want to be a nurse. So I had to leave my family behind, my sister, and after that actually my other brother, Abi, went also back to Berlin, and they stayed. My other brother went back to Berlin too, and both of them settled in Berlin, and we stayed behind, the two girls and my parents. So I went into Augsburg to become a nurse, wanted to be there.
To where? Sorry.
Augsburg. Want me to spell that?
Sure. Please.
Okay. And I stayed there probably a year or more, I don't remember. And we sort of graduated, me and my girlfriend, Mia. Mia went to work on a ship, and my parents didn't want me to go. They were still too young, you're not going to go anyplace. So I went to work in an office instead.
You were, how old are you, would you say?
I don't remember, 18, 19, 18 probably.
And what kind of job was it?
The office?
Oh.
It was an immigration office.
Oh, okay.
People immigrated. At that time I already knew some English because I had English. I took private lessons in Berlin
Oh, okay.
for English, so I already knew English, and I had a very good German teacher. She taught me how to type, so I went to work there.
Oh, was English something that was commonly taught after the war?
Not really, no. I had it more privately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they taught us Hebrew. This in Berlin when we were this was a Hebrew school, and they taught us Hebrew, how to read and write, and as a matter of fact everything, all subjects were in Hebrew. Yeah, there were teachers from Israel. They came and taught us. The teacher that I had, he was from England. He actually gave lectures in school too in Berlin, but because then the Hebrew, which wasn't right with my sister because she wanted more Hebrew. And yeah, I took English lessons privately, so I could work in the immigration office when people started to immigrate. This is what it now. We left off when we are in Fairveld, which is where I met my husband, and you asked how I met him. It was actually in the month of May. He was dressed in all white and white tennis shoes, and he looked so handsome. He had really thick black hair. And my girlfriend's sister introduced us. So that was how we met. Later on I found out he had his eye on me too, but he just didn't meet me yet.
Yeah.
That's cute.
It's cute, I know. It's been, you know how many years ago?
How many years?
Let's figure it was 51. I think it was 50. Let's say it was 51. What do we have now? 58 years ago? Am I right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's a long time, isn't it?
Wow.
Well, you can see it on our faces. You have to look at then and now. You'll see the difference.
So do you remember any details from when you first started dating him?
Yeah. I remember we had a date to go to the movies.
Yeah.
At that time we were in a camp, I told you it was Fairveld, and it wasn't a big camp. It was a DP camp. And I waited, he never showed up. So I figured, and it was close by. we were all sort of like close by, and he never showed up. So I went to his apartment, and sure enough, he was sick. He was in bed. That was the first time I realized that he is a kvetch. I didn't realize. I realized later on.
Yeah, must obligate.
Yeah. Well. And the second time that I can remember, my girlfriend and I went to the movies. We had movies which they were showing English movies, American movies, pictures. Went there, and I was sitting in the front, and with my girlfriend, and my husband and some of his friends were sitting behind us. What was he? 22, I think. And he has a very strange accent, as you probably heard him speak before.
Mm-hmm.
He speaks with a very sharp S, and we had such fun. We were laughing. You know, just to hear him talk. He was talking with his friends in the backyard. Plus, he is a concentration camp survivor, and I was very much afraid of those people because I heard that the Germans experimented on a lot of young people, all kinds of horrible experiments, and I was afraid of that. So I really actually didn't want to meet him or be anywhere near a concentration camp survivor. But at the end, in 1953, we got married. I was 19. I think he was 23 or so. Yeah. And we got an apartment which was consisted of one room and a bathtub where I put fish to swim because we had to have fresh fish all the time. There was no hot water and no nothing. It was really very poor circumstances. And as far as having money, neither of us has a penny to his name. Not him, not me. But we decided to get married anyhow, as most of the people did at that time. Okay. A year later, our daughter Jeannie was born. And she was born in 1954 in February. And we stayed there. He got offers to work in Munich and in other places, but because he was in Dachau, it was nearby where we were, it was about 30 kilometers from Munich. He didn't want to stay in Germany, so we decided to come to the United States. He had an uncle here that made an affidavit for us. So Jeannie, who was at that time, she was already 18 months old. Me and my husband, the three of us, came here on a military ship. The ship's name was General Langford.
Can you spell the general's last name?
General
Langford.
Langford.
Okay.
Langford, I think.
Langford or Ford?
I think Langford. If there is such a name, you can look it up. It was a military ship. And they separated the women and the men separate. The men had to sleep all the way on the bottom of the ship. It was horrible. And the women had a room that I shared with another woman that had another child. She was from France. Jean and I and her son, I think. We stayed in this one room. Later on, my husband told me he got sick down all the way on the bottom of the ship. He walked outside and he was starting to throw up and he almost fell overboard. I would never know what would have happened to him because he slid, and it was a very old ship. And it took us, I think, 2 weeks or so to come to the States. Wow. I know it was over a year. Well, at that time ships weren't going that fast. I mean, this was in 1955. So we came directly to Baltimore. And we stayed with that uncle Solomon, let him rest in peace. He had lost his first wife in the concentration camp.
Sorry, what's the uncle's name again?
Solomon Gruzin, yeah.
Solomon Gruzin.
Yeah, we stayed with him and his second wife, who was actually born in Russia, but she lived in America already a long time. She came probably many years ago. She was the American already, although she was also from Russia, an immigrant, but she was considered American. And after that, about 2 weeks later, we got our own apartment, and he started working, and we started to make a living in the United States.
What was his first job?
His first job was as a cabinet maker, which is what he learned in Germany. As you see, there's a picture of him when he was learning. See that one? Here, over there. He started to learn his profession. Can you see it?
No, go for it.
Can you see?
Wow.
Yeah. See how see the age difference.
Oh, wow. You actually kind of see it from here.
Well, you can take it out. Of course. Do you want to?
Okay.
Oh, sure. I'm telling you more about him than about me. Can you see?
Uh-huh.
This is, it says Germany, 1946. And that's him here. And that's his name. That's where his teachers or workers or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's really amazing that you have that.
Huh?
It's amazing.
This
that you have-
1946, that was after the war. That
Yeah,
was
but it's
not-
still, it's a great thing to have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Here are my 3 children. This was taken about 10, 15 years ago. You've met Jeannie, Kenny, you know, and this is Jeffrey. Okay. Kenny and Jeffrey were born already here in Baltimore. And Jeannie is the only one that was born in Munich, in Germany. As I said, in 1954, right? This is Kenny now. This is Jeffrey's wedding picture, but he's divorced.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, wow.
Well, that's an old picture.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, you girls are from where? Where are you? What's the name of your college?
Goucher.
Goucher. Okay, Kenny graduated from Towson State. Jeannie graduated from Johns Hopkins. So I think that's for me.
Because cabin. My friend, how are you?
Yeah, that's for me.
You pick it up, you can pick it up.
Okay. Wow, that is really pretty.
That's a great.
That's 1951.
1951. Was that your apartment?
Yeah, that was where we lived. Yeah, that was before we.
Oh,
were
sorry.
I must have been about 105 pounds or so. I'm 5'4". Later on, when we came to America and we needed money, I went to Hustlers one time and I needed to buy a dress. And either it was the buyer or somebody, she said, would you like a job here? I said, what would I be doing? She said, well, you would be mannequin. You would be walking around and showing off what we sell. I come home to my husband, I say, you know, Sully, they want me to work in Hustlers. They want me to model the clothes. He says, you? Never. I'm going to have 2 jobs. You're not going to work.
So we had a couple questions.
Sure.
Okay. So you said you celebrated your 16th birthday in Lechfeld? Lechfeld. Do you remember? Did you celebrate your birthday, or was it just?
It was just a
a
day.
month? Yeah.
I know it was. I was 16, but we didn't make any parties or anything like that. No.
Was it like that with all of your birthdays until that point?
Yeah.
After the war started?
You know something? Except for a few parties that my daughter gave us, I think it was like that.
Yeah.
My husband doesn't believe in gifts.
But I mean during the war.
Oh,
As
during
opposed
the
to-
war, we didn't
yeah.
do anything.
Yeah. Okay.
No. It wasn't even. I mean, in the time of war, where we lived in Russia, where we lived in Siberia, and when we lived in Central Asia, it was nothing. We were just happy to have something to eat. It wasn't anything happy. I'm so glad that you young people don't have to go through the things that we did. So it wasn't. Okay, any other questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I was wondering, you mentioned your wedding, but do you remember anything about your
Oh, are you
wedding?
kidding? I remember almost everything. We had a very big wedding, and it was in a DP camp. We had over 300 people.
Wow.
Yeah. The wedding was given mutually by my father and by my husband's father. His mother wasn't with us. She was still living in, she was liberated by the Russians, and they took her back to Lithuania where she stayed. At that time, my husband was working for the German government, and I went to Ort, and I took up cosmetology to massage the face and all that. So we had a lot of friends and a lot of people. So we made a big wedding. And since I was reading at that time a lot of books, and I had remembered that the men used to wear those cylinder hats, and they were wearing gloves. Yeah. That's what I made them for.
Oh, wow.
You should see that picture. The poor man wears gloves and tails.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
He must have.
I had it from all the books and the movies, and I wanted that to be this way. So he did put it on. He didn't find me. But he forgot my bouquet. I had no flowers.
Oh.
But the people that arranged the wedding, they put flower pots out around where the chuppah was. So I took a scissor, I cut all the flowers off, and I made myself a bouquet.
Wow.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I should show you a picture one day of this one. And I wanted to have a dress with tails. And my sister Sarah, and her girlfriend Paula were my bridesmaids. So they had to carry a great big train. And I went to the city, to Munich. I rented the dress. I didn't have any money to buy anything, so I had rented it. And our chuppah was outside, under the stars. There were so many rabbis there, I couldn't touch my husband, he couldn't touch me. They were very Orthodox rabbis. Yeah, but it was a very nice wedding, and it was the 24th of March, 1953. Yeah, at that time, my parents were still alive, both my brothers were alive.
And they all came.
They were all there. It was in this Fernwald, in this camp. That's where we got married. Yeah. A lot of our friends and my husband's friends, and a lot of the people that he was working with in that government that came. We had orchestra, but we couldn't dance together. It was too Orthodox. And one of the Germans had a guitar, and he sang, he entertained. The man that was working with my husband. It wasn't anything like here. It's not. It's like day and night. The times that we lived and the times now. But you know, we were so naive and wanted or needed so little that anything that was or we had, we were very happy with. We were very satisfied. Our eyes were not so big, and the ones were not. We were just happy to have enough food and to be together. That was it. Many of our friends didn't have their parents anymore. They didn't survive. So we were one of the luckiest ones that we did have. And my husband had his father that survived with him, and his brother, but he got very sick, so it wasn't good.
Can you describe the conditions at the DP camp?
The DP camp, okay, it was, Fernwald happened to be a military base, or a military place where the soldiers lived and their families. After the liberation from the concentration camps, the Americans threw all the people out from those little houses, and they put the survivors in. And more started coming because Russia let the people go too. So they started to come together, and in this camp they organized schools. There were schools there, and those people that were a little bit they didn't have, I think they only had about 5 or 6 grades. And those children that were older, they organized ORT, came in, and they taught, in ORT we had all subjects. We had anatomy, we had algebra, we had everything that a regular school has, but on top of it you also could learn your profession, whatever you wanted to be. So I decided maybe I should go for cosmetology. So, but not hair, just face, massage and makeup and all that. So that's what I took there, and I still have my diploma. Yeah, I have it someplace. Yeah, so we finished that. And of course, like I said before, my husband was working already, so he was not in any of the schools. He was already an old man at 22.
Wow.
Do you remember any stories, any good stories from the DP camp that you haven't talked about yet?
The good story was that people did not have, or at least people my age, didn't have the worries. We went to the ORT. Some of us went to school. Some of them decided to go to Munich to study more. But it was a very easy, good, at that time a good life. We used to get together, and they had a place where you could go and meet, and you could play ping pong, and you could play volleyball. It was more of a better life than this is. And of course, like I said before, there was a movie theater there, so we would go to the movies quite often. And there were dances organized with music. We could go. It was a free life, a worry-free life. It wasn't anything that you should be afraid of for your life or anything like that. And one of these dances, I went with friends of mine, and there were boys there. It wasn't anything special, but they wanted me to go up on stage and become Miss Felvel, but I was too shy. I said, me? No, I didn't believe that, so I didn't go. A friend of mine went up. She had to show her legs all the way up, and everybody said, "Oh, look what she's doing." But she didn't win. No, I never went up. No, I was too shy for that or something. But they wanted to push me, and I didn't go. I don't know if I was that beautiful, or they just saw me that way. I don't know.
I don't
They
know.
just-
The lady in New York certainly thought so.
Who?
The lady who offered you the job.
The job, but that was here already. My daughter was born already, and yeah, it's all past. So you young girls enjoy yourself while you're still young. It goes.
Oh.
I will stay.
Because I know you had a bunch.
Yeah, I had.
Do you know, the people in camp usually used to say that my husband and I look very much alike. They never thought we were married. They thought maybe we were brother and sisters. Which, I didn't see it, but a lot of people did.
Do you guys have questions?
I think Charlotte has
Actually, I think you answered all the ones I had written
must be.
down, but
I think that one is for me too. I can only tell the past.
And if you would know the future, wouldn't have to be here. So you make a lot of money. I don't know.
It's true. Played a lotto.
I won $7. I won $7 one time.
Finish with that?
I finished with it. Okay.
actually I have a couple more questions.
Okay. Don't be afraid. If I know the answers, I'll tell you.
Okay. What do you think was the hardest transition for you, coming out of the war and coming to America throughout the
God,
experience?
it was the hardest one to leave my family behind. I left my sister. She was still in school at the time. My parents were not well. They suffered a lot from the war, and especially losing three oldest sons. My mother wasn't well at all. And my husband didn't want to stay in Germany, as I told you before, so I had to go with him. But that was the hardest things we had to do. My father took us to the train station and he cried. And my sister cried, and we all cried. And I was holding Jeannie on my arm, looking out from the train window, and I saw them cry, and it was very hard. I think that was the hardest thing. And coming to the United States, we stayed 2 weeks with my husband's uncle and aunt. He had remarried this American girl. We couldn't stay any longer there because Jeannie was a baby, and they were 2 older people, so it was hard. So we took an apartment. And the first week that we came here, my husband got the flu. That was his greeting. It was his greeting to the United States, and he had to stay a week in bed. As I told you before, first date we had, he got sick. And we couldn't go to the movies. But because he is a concentration camp survivor, he has a lot of aches and pains all the time, so that comes natural. And it was very hard. I didn't have anybody here. When 5 years later, when my first son was born, Jeffrey, I didn't have anybody to leave Jeannie with. My husband had to go to work, so one of his cousins stayed with us. And there was nobody to make a bris, so Uncle Salmon's wife, Sarah, let her rest in peace, she was kind enough to help us out to make the bris. At that time we lived on Surrey Drive, and it happened, he was born in 1959, and in June we had a heat wave. And I never sweat. On his bris, I started to sweat. I never knew what sweating means, and I got all wet. Besides that, I had a nylon nightgown on, which makes you sweat anyhow. That was the first time that I had sweat running on my face. It was hard. I mean, it wasn't easy for us, and we had nobody really to turn to, except for my husband's uncle and one of his cousins. But somehow, you know, if you have to, you don't think about the hard times. You just do what you have to do, and that's it. You just do it. But then it started to get better and better. 9 years later, Kenny came along. And now I have 2 boys, 1 daughter, 2 grandsons, Jonathan and Kevin, and they're both at the University of Maryland. Jonathan's graduating now in May, and Kevin just entered. That's his first year. Next year he's going to Columbia, God willing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
He's very bright, yeah. He was going to go this year, but he didn't apply early enough, so he missed out. That's what it is. He liked languages, like me.
Yeah.
I like languages too. Yeah. I'm going to see him tomorrow. Yes, he said he'll be free from 11 to 1 if I can make it. If I can make it by then. That's in between classes, so we'll have lunch together.
That's nice.
Yes,
nice.
I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Great.
that's all right. Okay.
Do you have?
Yep. Actually, I've got a couple
Okay.
more. So when you found out about some of the atrocities that occurred, what was your initial reaction?
You know, it's such a long time ago, but I do remember that I couldn't believe it. I think we were still in Russia at the time, and we were very young, but people would say, you know, what happened to the people that were left behind. They were murdered, they were killed in the streets, there were such atrocities, but you couldn't believe it, that one person can do such horrible things to another person. So I remember I didn't believe it. I don't think my family believed it. They said that's just rumors that were going on. But the closer we came, you know, when Stalin said, okay, all the people that were born in Poland can go back home. And when we came back home and there was nobody there, everybody was gone. My mother had, also she comes from a family that were 7 children, and their children, their wives, and their wives' children. Nobody was left. Everybody was gone. And from my father's side too, there were also 7 children and grandchildren and aunts and uncles. There's nobody left. So we knew We knew what happened. And our city, Zamość, was really a lot of horrible things that even the Poles did to the Jewish people. They also tortured and killed for anything. And of course Lublin, you know, which isn't, my mother was born in Lublin, and that's not far from Zamość. And that's where Treblinka was, one of those places where the ovens were. So we found out later on, although we don't know where. Now one interesting story is Jonathan, my oldest grandson. He went to Betafille. Betafille has every year those children that graduate. They go to Israel or Poland to trips. Jonathan chose to go Poland and Israel, and he went to Treblinka, and he knew that all my family perished there, most of them. And he says, Grandma, I said Kaddish. I said Kaddish, and I had your family in mind.
I'm hungry right now.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really amazing.
Yeah. And he's named after my father.
Wow.
Yeah. But he's a decent boy, and he says, Grandma, he called me from Poland, he says, Grandma, I'm here, and I'm saying, I said Kaddish. You know what Kaddish is.
Wow.
Sorry. Can't help that. And yet, you know, we don't think about those things. You try to push it away as much as you can. And afterwards, my mother died first. She was a diabetic, and then my father died. Almost 5 years ago, my older brother Getzel died of colon cancer. He died. Actually, before him, my younger brother died. Abi died of a heart attack. He was 70. He wasn't old. But what he went through and all the heartaches that he had, I told you the story in the woods where he went. A little boy was a slender little person. We went through a lot. It's hard to remember all those stories. Some of the stories I don't even want to think about. Some of the stories I rather leave behind. I don't know. I don't remember much, but maybe it's of my own free will that I don't want to remember. But all of us that survived the war have a story to tell. Every one of us. I don't know who you spoke to or didn't, and I don't know whose is more horrible than the other, but they're all horrible. It was not a normal life for any of us. There was no schooling that was normal. I always wanted to be an airline stewardess. What did I become? A housewife. Actually, I'm not that. Really, I do all the bookkeeping. I do all the correspondence. So, but you do what you have to do.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So you said you went to school to become a nurse. So did you finish the school?
Yeah, I finished, yes, but I never worked as one. They wouldn't let me. My girlfriend did. She went on a ship. Yeah, and I'm not in touch with her. Her name was Tia. And I'm sure she's probably still today working.
Oh.
I have pictures with her. Pictures of my graduation. I don't have them here, but I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but you know, we didn't. There were possibilities, you know. In those DP camps, they offered all kinds of things that if you wanted to, you didn't have to sit and do nothing or become a vegetable. There were places you could go and do things, and a lot of young people did. Yeah. And here in this country, you have so many possibilities, and so many doors are open for you. Everybody seems to be down, depressed, or anxious, or worried. But this one has a nicer pair of shoes than I do. Oh, look at her dress. It's a designer. We didn't know about those things. At least not when I was growing up. And if we didn't have anything else to wear, my mother one time, we were in Stettin, she took off the drapes from the windows and she made a dress for me.
Yeah. Do you remember what the drapes looked like?
It was velvet. Yeah.
Red velvet?
No, I think it was a emerald green. Yeah, and she made me a nice dress. Yeah.
Did you wear it to one of those dances you went to?
Oh, I was too young for
No,
that.
that was after.
That was
when they were in the
Snuggled.
kibbutz and.
Yeah.
That was after the kibbutz. That was already.
Oh, after.
Well, actually, in between. Yeah.
So after.
She made us a dress. Yeah. And my brother and I shared a coat that she made. I can't explain, but there were such different times. I don't think that any girl 14, 15, 16, 17 could even imagine nowadays how you can be like that. I know when Jeannie was growing up, and at that time villagers were very popular. Most of her friends had a lot of them, and she felt bad because she didn't have so many. I remember we couldn't afford to give it to her, not because we didn't want to, we just couldn't do it, but she felt bad. I saved one of them as a memory. It's in my closet till today. I think maybe we were happy with the things that we finally had or could do or be free. It's a completely different way of life. I remember my husband wanted his brother should come, and he was sick from the concentration camp. I think I told you one of those Nazis knocked a kidney out of him, and he was a very young fellow. Did I tell you about that?
No.
Oh, I don't know if you want to hear that, but he was carrying food from one place to another, soup, which was mostly water anyhow, and he fell. It was winter. He was a young boy, must have been 15 or 16, and it was too heavy for him. They were carrying those great big buckets of soup on their shoulders, with one person in the back and that soup in the middle and one in the front. Well, he fell. And it was winter. One of the Nazis went up to him, and he had a metal thing or a bullseye, and he knocked him over the back, and he knocked him a kidney out. So he got very sick. And this was short before the liberation. So when the Americans liberated them, he was already bleeding from his mouth. They rushed him to the hospital right away. The American doctors recognized that he was very sick. He stayed 6 years in the hospital. They took one kidney out. And they needed penicillin, and it was, at that time, it was just the beginning of it. 1945, 46 was the beginning of penicillin. Some kind Jewish family sent him. I think they, either Americans or Australians, I don't know who it was really, but they bought penicillin for him, and they sent it to the hospital, and they gave him that. That probably saved his life, because from that kidney that they had to remove, he got infected, and the infection, and he got very sick, and he got TB, and TB settled in his knees, so they had to have the penicillin. But because he was still growing, he was still a young boy, they had to put the leg in
Traction?
what do you call it, the white stuff?
A cast?
A cast. They had to put it in a cast. And when they finally took it off, many years later, he couldn't move his knee, his leg became stiff. So he survived it. They let him out from the hospital after 6 years. He stayed in Gauting in Bavaria. One of his legs was stiff. He had to drag it along. It was horrible. And he did die at age 45. He wasn't a well man after that at all. It's a horrible story, I know. But this Nazi knocked him one kidney off and became very sick. He beat them over his back with this metal thing that he had in his hand. Why did you fall? As if he would have done it on purpose. He didn't want to spill the soup. The people were hungry, starving for a little bit of soup. He didn't want to spill anything. But those were the times. Okay. There's so many stories. I can't even think of it. I can't tell you all of them. It's not fair. You want to have something happy.
We do have something happy. You have something very happy here.
Very happy.
Yeah.
Thank God. Yes, you're right. You're right. I have 3 beautiful children.
Yeah. Your story ends, well, it hasn't ended yet, but what we have, everything, I don't know.
I've been very.
I'm glad that you and Israel have been so lucky now at this point in your life.
You have to work at it.
Yeah.
It doesn't come by itself.
Yeah.
But you know, because we are 2 people that are survivors, we don't want to give each other a hard time. That's the last thing we want to do. If anybody can help each other, you don't ask any questions. You're just there. And thank God we stick together. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's possible if there is nobody else, either that doesn't mix in or that you can't turn to. Maybe you grow together. It's possible. Nobody mixes in sometimes, it's not so bad. If we had no money, we just didn't go any place. If we didn't have the money to buy any clothes, we just didn't buy it. I always hated to owe people money or anything else. I didn't want to borrow. I didn't even want to buy a house if we couldn't pay for it.
Yeah.
We sold everything we brought with us, which wasn't much, but whatever at that time, in 1955, it was still worth something because the dollar was very strong. And in Germany, we could buy things that my parents gave us or his father gave us. We came here. A couple of years later, we sold almost everything we brought with us to buy our first house. But just not to owe money, not to owe anybody anything. So, buy on credit was not in my dictionary. I think in your country it's the same thing. If you can't afford it, you don't buy it. You just try to do without it until you save up enough, and then you buy, right? Right. Otherwise you make the banks rich.
Yeah.
No?
No.
Yeah, look, when you buy a
Yeah.
house, let's say the house is $100,000 or $1 million, then you pay, let's say, 30 years. You have bought your house how many times over? 3, 4 times over? No, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to make the banks rich. I wanted to make ourselves a little bit. So we try to save as much as possible, and thank God we're okay. Right now I don't have any complaints. Okay, you haven't asked me anything.
I don't know. I think you answered all my questions.
We all gave Charlotte questions beforehand, so it's
okay.
just
So she may have
okay.
some left.
Okay.
So.
yeah.
Yeah, I have actually, I think, 2 or 3 more.
Okay.
So at the time, what did you think of the Americans that had come in? Like, what was your initial reaction?
Okay. The first time when I had read Uncle Tom's Cabin in Germany, okay? So, I mean, if why you're laughing. And I knew that there were black people in this country. When we had to move from Uncle Solomon's house, you know, they gave us, actually the Hyers gave us some furniture because we had nothing. So they gave us something that we had to move. There were 2 black people that moved us, and I saw them sweating, and I got sick in my stomach. I didn't realize, even though I read Uncle Tom's Cabin, so I knew about them. But when you see somebody in person, and you see them working so hard, and it was hot, we came in August, so that must have been end of August or September. That was a bad experience for me. But as the American people, I think they're wonderful. I think they're really nice, kind people, at least at that time. They were nice. My neighbors were very nice. They tried to help as much as possible. They were kind, good people. And we were young, and we kept to ourselves a lot also. Sulik my husband had a cousin here that found us the apartment, which was on Cold Spring Lane, West Cold Spring Lane, which Jeannie loved animals, and she walked out. She was 18 months old at the time, like I told you. In the house where we lived, the men had cats, and the cats crossed over the road. Cold Spring Lane is a very heavy traffic street. She went right into the traffic to catch that cat because the cat ran over. The car stopped on all directions. And I started to scream. But the car stopped, and thank God everything worked out okay.
Yes, thank God. It's frightening.
She didn't know much. I
Yeah,
18 months old
For
child.
you, it's frightening.
Oh, it was horrible. Yeah, but she stopped. She still likes animals. She still has a dog now. And we always had animals in our house too. Well, I think the American people are nice. They're kind, thoughtful, and they're nice. And they help the whole world. They're not appreciated. They helped Germany rebuild millions and millions of dollars that they forgave the German government. They rebuilt it. And now they want us out. They don't appreciate us, even though we try to help the whole world. Till today, it's the same thing. No?
No, yeah.
Another one was, what do you think the biggest obstacle you had to overcome in your kind of journey through this experience would be?
Biggest obstacle? Do you know something? I don't think we looked at anything as an obstacle. I think everything was okay. I mean, you just did what you had to do. I don't think it was any obstacles. You didn't think of it that way.
Oh, okay.
When you're in a situation where you just have to do, you do it. It's not. It wasn't an. I can't think of any obstacles that it was. It was an obstacle for my husband. He didn't know any English. If that's what you consider an obstacle, he had to take the bus to go to work. I had to give him a piece of paper to write down the street that the bus driver had to let him off. I mean, that must have been an obstacle for him, but we didn't look at it this way. You know, we were three young people. It's like Jeannie says, three people grew up together. Jeannie, the 18-month-old baby, me at that time was 21, my husband was 25. We were three young people. Till today, Jeannie says, we all grew up together. I don't believe it. I don't think I'm grown up yet. She might be, but I'm not. No, I don't think so. I think I've had a very nice, after the war, after getting married, I've had a very nice, good life. I think you'll agree with me. I have a very kind, good husband. We always stick together. We make all the decisions together. We try to work it out. That's how it is. It's nothing bad. From now on, I hope it will be good and even better. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay? That's it?
I think so. Yeah, I think we also were wondering if any of your family members suffered any forms of depression after the war, or...
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. I don't think it was as popular with the names.
Diagnosing.
The diagnosis, the things. I'm sure my mother was probably depressed. I'm sure she had other problems also. And there's no wonder suffering as much as they did. We were children. And if a child is hungry and the parent doesn't have anything to give him to eat, it's horrible. I can think of it myself, being a parent. I'm sure that my older brothers must have been depressed. we were the youngest, and my sister and I were the youngest one, and thank God we had our brothers. They looked out for us. They suffered more than we did. They were the boys. At that time, the boys were sort of like a man's world. They looked out for the girls, for the two younger sisters. And we were lucky enough to be young enough to go to school still and to make friends. And as a matter of fact, when I was in school in Berlin, we went to a place. It's called Wannsee in Berlin. The school went there for 2 weeks. We stayed in the house where all the decisions were made to annihilate the Jewish people. You know about Wannsee?
Yeah.